Iliad is one of the most well-known epics in literature. There have been countless movies, books, translations, and reimaginings of the poem. It is a bit of a long read. My copy was around 600 pages, and some parts are a little bit lengthy, but overall it kept me intrigued. It definitely helped that I loved Greek mythology growing up and still do. This is my second time reading through the Iliad, so I have a pretty good grasp on the story before reading, but the second read through definitely helped me refresh my memory and I picked up on things that I hadn't noticed the first time reading the Iliad. Still, one of my favorite reads to date, but this isn't a review of how much I liked the story. This is an analysis on what makes this poem an epic and why it is so important today. You may have seen Troy, the blockbuster movie starring Brad Pitt as our very own Achilles. Well, it's not super accurate, although entertaining to watch. Doesn't really follow the Iliad as well as it could have. I just thought I would add this in since this particular movie is pretty well known, and it's a good example of how the Iliad has inspired different forms of media today. I haven't seen it, but I have read enough reviews online to see that people do like the movie, if they like movies, but if they're watching it to see if it's similar to the epic, they don't really care for it. So, with the story in mind, I thought a short synopsis of the Iliad would be good, so everything I mention is a little easier to understand from here on out. It is set 9 years into the Trojan War, and the commander-in-chief, Agamemnon, is discussing with many of the other soldiers, including Achilles, our main character and best warrior in the Trojan War, about how to stop Apollo from terrorizing the Greek camp. The reason Apollo is casting disease on the Greeks is because Achilles and Agamemnon took 2 women as war prizes. Achilles took a woman named Briseis, and Agamemnon took a woman named Chryses, who also happens to be a priestess of Apollo. Apollo is fuming because Agamemnon refuses to return Chryses back to her father, although Agamemnon does say that he will return Chryses if Achilles gives him Briseis in return. Achilles refuses this proposal because he does not want to give up his war prize to Agamemnon. So behind his back, Agamemnon returns Chryses and steals Briseis. Achilles is enraged, and he refuses to fight. The Greeks start losing to the Trojans due to Achilles' lack of participation in the war, and along with this, Achilles had asked his mother, Thetis, who is a sea nymph, to make the Greeks lose the war. Thetis then asked Zeus to send Agamemnon a dream to rally his troops to victory in order to purposely make the Greeks lose. Zeus does this, and Agamemnon is filled with false confidence that the Greeks will win. Achilles agrees to help make a plan for Agamemnon to send troops out to the battlefield. This plan involves Patroclus, Achilles' closest companion, to go out and fight dressed as Achilles. They follow through with the plan, and in doing so, Patroclus is killed by Hector, the best warrior on the Trojan side. Hector takes the armor from Patroclus' body, and the Greeks bring the body back for burial. Achilles hears of the news that Patroclus has died and is completely inconsolable. He is filled with rage and agrees to go back into battle. Hephaestus makes the new armor for Achilles, and off he goes, leading the troops into the battlefield. He kills every Trojan in his path, riddling the battlegrounds with bodies, and finally reaches Hector. Hector does not flee from Achilles, but he is chased 3 times around the city before Athena comes to Hector, disguised, in order to trick him into facing off with Achilles. They fight an epic battle that ends with Achilles giving a very lengthy speech about how much he hates Hector and how he wishes him the worst after death. Hector is killed, and Achilles attaches Hector's body to the back of his chariot and drags him to the Greek camp. Achilles is still filled with rage, and for 9 days he drags Hector's body around Patroclus' funeral bier. The Greeks agree that this has gone on long enough and have Hermes sneak King Priam, Hector's father, into the camp. Priam meets Achilles and pleads to him to give his son back. Priam offers a ransom to Achilles and begs him to think of his father. Achilles is filled with sorrow from this and accepts the ransom and gives Hector's body back to Priam. The poem ends with the Trojans and Greeks in a temporary truce in order for the Trojans to have a proper burial for Hector. Now I want to talk a little bit about the origins of this poem and just some basics about the poem before I get into the full analysis. The Iliad was written by Homer, but the thing about Homer is that he probably wasn't actually a real person. The Iliad was originally an oral poem that was performed in front of an audience. Over time, though, around the 8th century, maybe the 9th century BCE, the Iliad was written down by multiple people that had slightly different variations of the story, and this is how we got the Iliad we know today. Fun fact, some people believe that Homer is a term for blind men who wander the countryside reciting epic poetry. The term Iliad is Greek for the poem of Ilion. Ilion is just another term for Troy, so the Iliad literally means the poem of Troy. The Iliad is episodic, which means that each episode, which is set up sort of like a chapter in modern literature, it reads like different events put together, sort of like a TV series. The Iliad was written and performed in dactylic hexameter, which, to make a comparison, is like Shakespeare's iambic pentameter, except for Greek literature. This rhythm is used in multiple Greek epics, like the Odyssey and other poems by Homer and Virgil. The basic setup of dactylic hexameter is the use of a long syllable followed by 2 shorter syllables. I put a picture of the first lines of the Iliad in Greek and English that show how the dactylic hexameter is used. We can get into the analysis of the poem itself. The question I want to go over is why the Iliad is classified as an epic. We all know that the Iliad is an epic poem, but what are the characteristics that make it one? I want to talk about the hero. I think the hero is the most important aspect to an epic because they are the main character, and without them, there really would be no story. Our main hero from the Iliad is Achilles, although there are many other heroes in the story such as Ajax, Odysseus, and although this one may be a bit controversial, Hector. Achilles is part god and part man. His father is Peleus, king of Phthia, and his mother is Thetis, a sea nymph. He checks off the box for being a hero who is physically superior to his peers due to his demigod abilities. He is strong and the best fighter in the Trojan War. His fatal flaw is his lack of emotional control, but more specifically, his rage, which happens to be the opening lines of the Iliad. Rage, goddess, sing the rage of Peleus' son Achilles. His lack of emotional control puts those around him in danger, and at one point it kills his companion, Patroclus. This sets off his rage in full blast, and it involves him killing anything in his path to Hector, then killing Hector himself and dragging Hector's dead body around for multiple days on the back of his chariot, all because he's so angry. He only regains composure when King Priam empathizes with Achilles in order to retrieve his son's body. Achilles follows the blueprint for an epic hero pretty much to a T. A large part of the reason Achilles follows the criteria so well is because epic characteristics are based off of ancient Greek epic poems like the Iliad and the Odyssey. The gods play a huge part in the Iliad through manipulating and advising the mortal characters. The gods use the mortals as pawns to their own arguments and problems, and the Iliad definitely showcases that. Athena and Hera take the side of the Achaeans, which are the Greeks, due to Paris not choosing them as the most beautiful goddesses. Athena helps Achilles plenty of times, especially in the fight with Hector, by deceiving Hector into giving him false confidence in a showdown with Achilles. Apollo sends diseases to the Greek camps due to Chryses being stolen as a war prize and not being given back to her father. Zeus helps Thetis, Achilles' mother, by sending Agamemnon a dream that promises victory to the Greeks, which in turn creates more conflict with the Trojans, all because Achilles asked his mother to make the Greeks lose. These are just a few of the countless times that the gods involve themselves in the Trojan War. It's a pretty big aspect in epics to have some sort of supernatural force play a part in the hero's affairs throughout the story. The gods in the Iliad help and manipulate the mortals involved in the Trojan War. The Iliad was performed orally, and over the years, different versions were put together to form the written versions we know today. The epic originally was performed in front of an audience using dactylic hexameter, and a drone chant was also used while performing in order to make the audience lose individual self-awareness and replace it with a group awareness during the ritual. The loss of self-awareness while listening and watching an epic brings the group together in a hypnotizing fashion in order to fully immerse themselves in the story. You experience the loss, the victories, and the challenges all as one group, and then go out and share the story in order to keep it alive. And that's what the Greeks did before writing down stories was a thing. Lessons and morals are what we take from an epic after reading or listening to it. The lessons in epics represent the morals in the culture that they come from. Although they may be talking to a specific culture that they come from, epic lessons can still be held to be true in modern times. A big part of ancient Greek culture is war. I think the Iliad does a wonderful job in portraying why war is not as glorious as other depictions in literature make it out to be. War is messy and tragic. It's unpredictable and inevitable sometimes. I think the consequences of bad leadership are also another lesson to be learned in the Iliad as well. It is no secret that Agamemnon is a poor leader in the Iliad. He is selfish and stubborn to a fault. His actions cause his troop to suffer greatly. Hector is an example of a good leader in the Iliad. He is the leader of the Trojan troops and does not run away from Achilles when he is faced with the consequences of killing Patroclus. Despite his wife pleading him to lead his troops from the inside of the city walls, he says that he cannot run away from his fate and he must fight with his fellow soldiers. Tragic elements are another reason an epic is an epic. Many epics use the tragedy and hardships of a hero to heighten the celebration of them when they are at their tragic end. Not many epics end on a happy note either. Most of the time, epics end with the hero's downfall, or even the hero dying. The Iliad is an epic and a tragedy. Achilles' fatal flaw leads to his downfall. He is overcome with rage, and his actions cause the war to turn against the Greeks. The death of Patroclus shows that war, although it may be necessary, is not as glorious as it looks. To Achilles, the reason he is fighting becomes personal. He needs to get revenge on Hector for killing Patroclus. This leads to an ending of the epic that is not really a good or happy one. The Iliad ends with Priam getting his son's body back and a temporary truce in the war in order for Hector to have a proper burial. Achilles has not redeemed himself in order to make a happy ending. The Iliad portrays Achilles as a strong and heroic warrior, but his actions are not plausible. Heroes are not role models. In Homer's poems, I notice that the main characters are not usually static. Achilles does change through the story. He starts off as a headstrong warrior who will not bend to Agamemnon's orders and becomes a very angry character who ends the story broken down from the loss of Patroclus. Achilles is a tragic character that causes a lot of tragic elements in the story. Now we go on to why the Iliad is still relevant today. The lessons and basic elements that the Iliad has stay true to today's standards, especially when it comes to war. Though warfare has progressed tremendously in the weapons area, people still deal with the emotions that war brings the same way since the ancient world. As I stated before, war is unpredictable and it can be inevitable just like the Trojan War. Soldiers still see the same horrors of war that they did long ago, the loss of a close friend in battle, the anger caused by an incompetent leader, and so on. Achilles went through the emotions and actions a lot of soldiers face nowadays. His anger from the loss of a close friend drove him to be a cold-blooded killer who did not care about anyone's life, including his own. Real soldiers experience this themselves. There have been stories of soldiers losing people close to them in the midst of battlefield and becoming inconsolable and vengeful for blood of the opposing side who murdered their friend. Achilles' lack of respect towards Agamemnon is caused by Agamemnon's selfish decisions to take Achilles' prize since he had to give up his own. Achilles even says to Agamemnon, "No, you colossal, shameless. We followed you, to please you, to fight for you, to win your honor back from the Trojans." He is upset and refrains from fighting. Again, a very human thing to do when you feel disrespected. Soldiers go AWOL for numerous reasons, and one of them being pushed past the breaking point by a bad leader. One other thing the Iliad does is it does not dehumanize the quote-unquote bad guys. The Trojans are feeling the same pain as the Greeks. We see this in real life too. We see the video footage or hear on the news the devastation that the bad guys still face. Families are torn apart, people die and are mourned. War can be terrible, and the Iliad does not shy away from that. It really brings out the realities that fighting can cause. The Iliad is full of elements that make it such a great piece of literature. There is no arguing that it is one of the most well-known works from the ancient world. The story has sparked inspiration for many movies and books. The ancient Greek epic poems are also a guideline for the basics of all epics to date, from the hero to the tragic ending. The Iliad does not shy away from the horrors of war and the consequences that war causes. It is an epic story about loss and pain that will be read for many centuries to come. My sources. Thank you.